Hey, this is Melissa from Catch the Buzz and Love Notes from God. And today I have my good friend, Seth from Rise Zion. Say hi, Seth.
Thank you, Melissa, for having me on.
And he recently just reached 40,000 subscribers, which is awesome. And how long have you been doing this now, Seth? When did you start?
Well, I started this about 1 year ago. So it almost exactly a year ago. So in October or September, I believe, we have videos now on my podcast of the very beginning when I started out that just say 1 year now. So I think that since we're coming up on October, I'm pretty sure it's October when we started. So
So it's almost the Rise Zion birthday.
yes, it is. It's the
First
1 year
birthday.
anniversary of our of our start, and really, we've had such remarkable growth, you guys, and I'm so thankful for all of you. If there's members of my audience who are watching this interview, I'm so thankful for you guys for following and subscribing to the channel. It really means a lot to me.
Well, and so Seth, I know I've been watching your channel since I think you were about like 3 or 4 months doing your channel when I started
Ah,
watching. It
all
seems like
right.
I know it's been a quite a long time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I noticed that it's like some of my earlier videos you hadn't watched yet, and so I realized that's probably when you started, is about 3 months in. So you've been with us for quite a while, Melissa. So
yeah,
I always appreciate your comments and stuff.
yeah. Well, my thing has been as a podcaster, I'm like it's important for us to all support each other, and if I'm gonna hope for comments, and I know for both of us, this is it's kind of a mission, trying to like help people to come to know Jesus Christ and
Yeah,
helping people to feel encouraged. And so for me, I'm like, how can I ask other people to comment on my videos if I'm not going to take the time to go and comment on somebody else's that maybe needs some encouragement, just like I do? So
yeah, that's a lot of work. So I
yeah,
I, I certainly appreciate it for sure.
yeah, we all and that's why I say to everybody is I'm like whether it's my channel or somebody else's, like please encourage other podcasters because they are getting people are taking the time to not be nice. So
Yes, that's true.
anyway, so Seth, if you go and tell us a bit about yourself, because this is your for your birthday, your Rise Zion birthday, you're having your first interview. So,
Yeah.
where did you like grow up, and just go ahead and start
Well,
telling us
that's a
about
good
yourself.
question. So I actually grew up in Santaquin for most of my life.
Is
So
that
I
in
was
Utah?
born in Ogden.
Um,
What's that?
is that in Utah, Santa Quinn? I
Yes, it
never
is.
know.
It's in Utah. A lot of people don't know where that is, but actually, it's a favorite spot of Elder Uchtdorf. He comes down to Santaquin to buy apples from the Red Barn. The Red Barn is this little. It's a family owned business, and they it, Santaquin is known for its orchards and its produce. So that's what we're kind of famous for. It's a very small town. It's just past Payson. So that's where I grew up. I live in Orem right now. So yeah, I mean, I'm all over the place in Utah mostly, and yeah, I mean, I really had a great childhood. I would say living in a small town is certainly a good thing, I think, for just having good family values. Growing up in the outdoors a lot of times. I remember. And it's really remarkable seeing how the town has grown over the years, and being a part of that kind of a small community as it's growing up. It does make you feel kind of invested in the future of the town. Being in a big city doesn't necessarily mean that you are as invested as you would be in a small town, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with that because I think yeah, there's more of the responsibility because you can't say, well, I don't know them because they're like, well, maybe I wish I didn't know them.
Yeah.
you know.
Well, yeah. Yeah, and it's a good place to live for sure. But yeah. So that's where I grew up. Do you have any other questions about childhood?
Um, do you want to share? Do you have any stories to share of like funny things that happened or hard lessons you learned?
I get hard lessons, I guess. Well, I guess some of the things that I learned as pertaining to podcasting, um, was just a lot of hard work, I guess. I think that probably growing up, what that was probably the one lesson that I can that I probably took away from my childhood is just the value of hard work. I had parents who we worked a lot and we did a lot of yard work and we had a large property, and so we did gardening, we did all sorts of things growing up that would require us to do hard work. And that really is a part of doing a podcast. And a lot of people think, oh, you're just a YouTuber, but they don't realize the amount of work that goes into it. And doing that hard manual labor just teaches you that you can do hard things. And doing a podcast is hard in different ways, but it requires consistency. It requires focus. It requires, that you just really dig in and do the work. So, yeah.
Oh, another interesting bit of curiosity is, do you mind sharing your ancestry a little bit? Like
Oh,
your
well, yeah,
where they came
that's
from?
true. So yeah, my ancestry is from Denmark and from England. So I'm about 3 generations of Latter-day Saints. So since we do Latter-day Saint podcasts, that's probably what people are interested in. But yeah, so my family immigrated over from Denmark. The pioneers had already come across the plains at that point, so they just met up with the Saints in I think it was Utah initially, but then went up into Idaho. So that's my dad's side of the family, and I'm not sure exactly where my mom's side of the family ended up. I think they somehow ended up in California. I know that. Um, but yeah, then we kind of the two families eventually merged and came into Utah. So, uh, yeah, I think it was my great great grandfather who was a polygamist. So, uh, he had a lot of wives and a lot of kids, and so I don't know. It I can't think of anything really truly super remarkable about my family history except for just that, we have family from Denmark and England. I guess that the part of Denmark is pretty interesting on my dad's side. He actually comes from a small whaling island off the coast of Denmark in that Baltic Sea area. This is the Baltic Sea area, but it is kind of a temperate climate zone, actually, which is surprising because you think it'd be cold there all the time, but it's actually quite temperate year round.
Hmm.
So that's kind of an interesting little factoid.
Do you happen to know what the island name is?
I don't.
Yeah. I just thought
It's
there
just
might be somebody
Denmark
that's like,
thing.
"Oh, I have a relative from there too," like you just
Yeah,
said.
I think it has a population of about like 1,000, so it's like it's
Yeah.
not very much. It's quite a
Well,
small island.
hopefully still above the sea level. I
Yeah, it is. It
know.
is.
um, but yeah, and so then high school, and what kinds of hobbies and interests and stuff did you have as a kid and
Hmm.
as a
Yeah.
teenager? And
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in art. That has been one of my main hobbies. Growing up, I've always had a talent for it. But again, hard work comes into that. It's not just like because when you're a kid, it's like I think this is typical of most people. I think that a lot of kids grow up and you probably have like one kid in your family who is a really good artist, or has an aptitude for it, but it's still not great.
mhm.
And it does take a lot of practice to develop that. And so all throughout high school and through my schooling, I really focused in on doing art. Um, and a lot of that, I think I was actually just reminiscing about this the other day, is I think a part of that was I actually had I think it was second grade, an art teacher who was actually quite mean, actually, and said that what I had done was not good, which is just something that you don't typically say to a child. But it was like ever since that point, though, she was not an artist herself. Let me just tell you, but she was a grumpy lady. But in any case, that kind of really made me buckle down, and I'd always kind of just stuck in the back of my head. It kind of bothered me as a second year, as a second grader, and so that just kind of stuck in the back of my mind, and I buckled down and really got good at drawing. I did art through high school. Um, I was good at math as well. I was AP student in calculus. I did really well, passed the test with a 4 out of 5. So, um, yeah, I do have an interesting mind that way. That I can be very mathematical and very artistic at the same time, which is not typical as I understand it. Uh, What was the other questions that you asked about you asked talents, interests, and where I went to high school. Oh yeah, so I went to high school in Payson. So Payson High is the high school actually where where they filmed Footloose. And that's
Oh,
recently been on the news, kind of floating around. So yeah, Kevin Bacon was there at Payson High, and he actually attended Payson High because that's where he had to go to school as they were filming.
oh,
So
that's interesting, huh?
yeah, and they recently teared down the old high school, and I was really kind of sad about that.
Yeah.
Um, because they've just built a brand new high school. They tore it down this year actually. So
Oh,
that's just something that's been going around. I don't think they ought to have done it, but they needed the parking, so they say. But
yeah.
it was just a kind of a cool building. It had like 3 levels. Um, well, and I say 3 levels. It's probably like 2.5 levels because the third level was actually an additional gym where they could play basketball. So it was just a really interesting building, and I think they could have maybe turned it into a museum or something. I don't know. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to think about. Um, but yeah, that's where I grew up. That's my interests. I went to college then.
Well, didn't you go on a
Following.
mission first?
Yeah, well, yes, I did go on a mission first. So yeah, I went on a mission. So I graduated in 2009, and so I went on a mission. I think, let's see, 9. Yeah, so I went on a mission, I think, in 2009 and came home in 2011. So people were asking me actually about that in the comment section because, the economic downturn of 2008 was actually quite hard for a lot of us. And when I came back from my mission, it was still hard to
Yeah.
find a job for years and years after. So that was a really kind of a hard area of my life as I was working 2 different part-time jobs and just trying to find another job that would be more stable and give me more income than I needed to go to school, and to actually have a car of my own, which was a huge milestone. Actually, you know, it was kind of like it's kind of an interesting thing that I look back on these like milestones, like oh my goodness, like this was such a big deal, but it was at the time. And I do attribute God in all of these things that because I can really see, and Melissa, we've talked about this before, because I can really see in my life as I look back on the things that have happened. And even though there was a lot of struggle, I can definitely see the Lord's hand in all of it leading me up to this point of becoming a podcaster and doing the things that I'm doing right now.
Well, and you
And
served in, was it Argentina? Is that where you served?
yeah, I served in Argentina, Rosario. Thank you for thank you for reminding me that before I go on off on a tangent here. But yeah, I did serve in Argentina, Rosario. I served most of my time, and people when they say Rosario, they just think I was in the city, right? But Argentina Rosario mission at the time was a huge area, and it encompassed like 2 different states. So it was a massive area, and sometimes we had to travel for hours to get to meetings that we were doing for the mission. Um, yeah, it was quite a large area, and one of the interesting missionary memories that I have was actually traveling. Um, what was the it was one meeting that we went to, and we just stopped to take a break because we'd been in this van for so long. A member had the church had hired a member to carry us in their van because they owned a van shuttling business, and we got out when it was completely pitch black, and there's no other cars on the road. We were on the highway actually, and it was just Argentina. There's just so much space out there. Like it was just flat for miles and miles around, no mountains whatsoever. And we just looked up, and there was just these brilliant stars everywhere because there's no buildings or anything around us because we were just in the middle of nowhere. So I know that's just one of the interesting missionary memories that I have that it kind of, I guess, exemplifies my mission in a way. Um, But yeah, do you have any more questions about the mission before we move on, I guess?
You got to tell me one funny story.
From the
There's got to
mission?
be a funny story and then like
Mm.
some a funny one, and then like a really spiritual one where you're like, wow, God's hand is in this. There's no way this would have happened
Yeah.
without God being in charge.
Well, yeah, and I I'm glad that we actually are staying on topic here because the mission was a huge part of the reason why I decided to start my podcast in the first place. So it's great that you're bringing this up. But yeah, I guess that the funny story, funny spiritual story, it was in the first week. I think it was the first working day that I was on the mission. Okay, in my first area of Venado Tuerto. Okay, so again, out in the middle of nowhere. Venado Tuerto is this little city. Um, but it was raining that day. Okay. And it rains in Argentina. Oh my goodness. It rains and rains and rains so hard. And the thing is that they don't really have roads in Argentina. And they don't really have any way to drain the water. So it puddles in the street and it floods. Now, everywhere in Argentina, they have these things that are called zanjas. And these are basically both your drainage for your like sewer water and also your drainage for like draining your road. So like if it rains, then that's kind of your gutter basically, and it's just this kind of open sewer system. It's quite disgusting because I'm sure they actually have probably regulations that make it so that people can't drain the water from their house into the Sanha, but everybody does it anyway. So
Mhm.
you get all sorts of gunk in it. But yeah, it flooded, and as we
Oh,
were going down the street, we're just like trudging through this water, and it's already up to our calves, because the water's that deep because it really rains, you guys. Like, it's so hard actually for us to relate to that here in the dry west, but in these areas it really really rains, and if you've been, to Argentina, you know that. But so any case, we're walking down the street and we hear yelling. Okay. And it turns out, and we can see like down the road that there's this car and it's in the Sanha. Okay. So the car has totally, like, the back end of it somehow is totally in the water. It's completely submerged, the back half of it. So the car is just filled with water in the back.
and
And
dirty
the
bad water,
boy,
right?
yes, the
Ugh.
irrigation, the nasty irrigation water.
Like an
Oh yeah, and you
open
get like
sewer,
dead
right?
animals in it and like all sorts of stuff. And so it was really quite questionable. but um but yeah, the boy was yelling because it was his car and his dad had backed it up and had run into the Sanha instead of going up their driveways as they had intended. And so we were just like, oh, okay, well, I guess we should try to help them get their car out. So we go up there, and uh, the water's just getting deeper and deeper as we're getting closer to the Sanha, basically. And we're like, "Hey, do you guys need any help?" And at this point, they didn't really realize who we were because we were missionaries. They didn't typically they wouldn't want to talk to the missionaries, probably. But they're like, "Yes," and like and the boy was just like inconsolable. He was just like yelling and cussing in Spanish, and yelling at his dad like, "What are you doing, you idiot?" Like, it was quite the scene. But yeah, like, we're just like, "Okay, we gotta fix this," and I just kind of, like, looked at my companion, and he looked at me, and he was from California, Elder Klafke, and he, like, looks at me as like, "Can you drive a stick shift? Because every car here is stick shift." And I'm like, "Yeah, I can drive a stick shift." Because I grew up driving stick shifts, right? So, I was like, "Yeah, I can drive a stick shift." And so, I get into the car, and I'm like, "Okay, so I'm gonna try to drive it forward," and then he and the dad got into the Sanha. Well, I mean, we all ended up in the Saha to get into the car in the first place. But we all got in, and I was in the driver's seat. The water was like right up. I was like sitting in the water kind of because that's how high it was. And so I had to like I looked down and I had to put it in gear, and all the gears are like reversed. And
Oh,
of course, like
no.
reverse is not reverse because it's like a German car. It's not even a Spanish car. So it's like, okay, so what is the reverse? Like, I don't want to be in reverse. I want to go into drive. And like I realized that it was in, like, somehow I knew that it was where I needed to put it. So I figured out that first of all.
The Lord was telling you.
The first time. Yeah, I kind of think that that was the case actually because it was really confusing.
Yeah.
And so it's like it was typically where the reverse would be. That's what was forward.
Mhm.
So yeah, I put it into gear and we start moving and my companion and the dad managed to push it out as we were driving forward. So we got the car out. And we didn't like say anything. We just like said, "Okay, we'll see you later." And we didn't like give them our contact information or anything because we were just like soaked in water and like disgusting water. So I think we went home after that point to go, like clean up and stuff because it was like gross. But um so yeah, it was kind of a funny story. And
And you said that was the first day of your
that
mission?
was the first day on my mission, you guys.
Wow.
Yeah. The
You
first
got
working day, because the first other days were us traveling to get there, because that was quite
Yeah.
the but any case,
Now the
what was I gonna
spiritual
say?
story.
Yeah, well, the thing is that, later on, I learned from somebody, another missionary who was just telling a story, and this was, like I think it was, like, 6 months in. I have to review my journal because I wrote this down in my journal somewhere, but it was about 6 months later that I hear a missionary telling a story about a dad and a son whose car got stuck in the Sanha, and that two missionaries helped to pull them out of the Sanha. And then they were investigators, and I think that they got baptized. So
Wow.
yeah, so I think that that was the case. I I really enjoy that story though, and I enjoy telling it because yeah, that was my first day on the mission.
That
of
was your introductory baptism.
Yeah. Well,
Your
I mean, it was I say it's the official first day of the mission because actually, just for some additional context, my first day was actually when we arrived in Rosario from the airplane.
Mhm.
And we had traveled all day to get there and then slept at the mission house because they had like just basically this entire room filled with bunks where the missionaries would come and stay when they first arrive. And then they go out to their different locations because it's so huge, right?
Mm.
But in any case, we slept, we got up the next morning, and we went to a baptism because they had a baptism in the Fisherton area, which later became one of my areas as well. I eventually made it back to the mission offices and I served there for just one transfer, I think, one or two transfers. But they had a mission, they had a baptism, and so we went and we walked down, and there's just like kind of just like this chaos everywhere. These dirt roads, right, are everywhere in Argentina. They don't typically have paved roads except for in wealthy areas. And there was like this dead horse in the Sanha. And so it just was like this whole like alien world that we were introduced to. And there's like mosquitoes everywhere, and it was hot and humid. It was the whole thing. So
And your hair
that was
was
technically
super
my first.
curly, extra, extra curly, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
you bet it was like, yeah,
You probably
yeah. So
never realized how curly your hair could be until you were in humidity, just
yeah, yeah, it's true. And yeah, at that time I had very short hair. I let my hair grow out now,
Oh,
but
yeah.
yeah, we were like, it was such an awful experience, like just arriving in Argentina. It's surprising that anyone stays really, because it's like they didn't feed us properly. They gave us like donuts. So
For some people, that's food.
yeah, they gave us donuts, and then they gave us like a cup to share between us. So it was just like, oh my gosh, like guys, like I, don't- it was
Thank
the mission
you.
office who was in charge of that, and when I was in the offices, we changed things up a little bit, um,
Yeah,
but
hopefully
yeah,
we can have you share a picture later because that would be cool to put in the video, a picture from
okay.
your mission.
Well, if I can find, I have pictures at my house, not here at my house, at my
Mhm.
parents' house. I mean,
Yeah, gotcha.
so, but yeah, okay, yeah, and then you told me to share a very spiritual story. Okay, yes, I have spiritual stories. And Melissa, this is so fun that you're actually asking me all these things because this is actually why I started my podcast in the first place, was to tell missionary stories. So yeah, it's really important.
Now you
But
get
yeah,
to.
so yeah,
You're on.
yeah, I can just tell my
You're
my
welcome.
story. So yeah, all of these things just kind of like are a part of the inspiration. And as I said before, it just kind of built up to this point, and I can see God's hand in it for every step of the way leading up to me starting this podcast, which is what I think I was truly ever always supposed to do. So, but I mean, you can't discount all the steps to get there though, because you learn all the way until you get there. So don't, like, if you're not where you are at the moment, guys out there in the audience, you're not where you think that you need to be in life. Just trust in God, right? Because He is working up to something if you're listening to Him. So, in any case, a very spiritual experience that I had. Oh man. Okay, so well, there's several that I would like to tell you about, but there was one that was particularly interesting. My mind comes back to this one a lot because it was so curious what happened. And so this experience was when I was in Anacleto, Medina, and this area was quite a unique area. It was different from every other area in my mission in the fact that it was in a different state. There was just a slightly different culture there from everywhere else. Like, it was even more humid there. It was by a huge river, the Paraná, and everything was very, very hilly. So like everything was hills. So you go down a hill, you have to go back up a hill. It's just everything's hills, and plants grew on all the buildings because it was very, very tropical in a way. I don't know if that's the correct zone technically, but in any case, this area was different also in the fact that this was an area where I didn't particularly feel like I was 100% safe all the time. Um, there was actually a lot of witchcraft in this area too. So that was something that was quite interesting that I had never really experienced prior to the mission. People would practice it's actually a religion that comes from Brazil. It's a mixture of Native American beliefs, Catholic beliefs, and kind of like spiritualism, but it's kind of gotten to the point where it's come to be like kind of recognized as a witchcraft, or like a practice that would be more occult. I don't know. It's called Macumba, and it's very confusing. I don't particularly want to talk about it too much in terms of like being witchcraft, because of the fact that there are people who actually practice it. But anyway, they like call in spirits to their home, and so everywhere people will go out of their doors and ring bells to call in the spirits.
That's creepy.
So yeah, so every once in a while you just hear like throughout the entire city like bells ringing. So I didn't
Wow.
particularly feel like safe in this area, but some of the most interesting spiritual experiences happened here in this area as well. Um, so there was definitely opposition in all things, I think. So in this area, it was very strange. So we were teaching this woman in an apartment complex. Um, and she had a son who was mentally challenged. He was older, but he was still mentally challenged, and she would worry about him because he would go out and wander, and you can't really control, an adult. But he still was just mentally slow. In any case, we went to visit her one day, and it was getting to be a little bit later, so the sun was kind of going down, and she was worried because he hadn't come back yet, and he had been gone for quite some time. And so, we kind of explained to her that we could give blessings of comfort, and we weren't supposed to solicit that, but we just kind of explained that we could, and then she asked if we could give her a blessing. So we were kind of just bending the rules a little bit to get to that point. But yeah, so I was the one who could speak Spanish the most at this point. My companion was I was his, I guess you'd call me his uncle because I was like his second companion. So he's quite brand new. Um, but yeah, so we put our hands on her head and we give her a blessing, right? And right as I was starting, there was this very peculiar thing that happened. So this wind just kind of blew through the entire house, and it felt quite um significant. I could feel the spirit like very, very strongly in that moment. And this wind comes through at the same time. And I've said this before, and I've told this story different times, but I wasn't sure at the time if that wind was associated with this event, but it did seem very timely. It felt static almost. So as we were giving that blessing, as we started, I immediately had these words come into my mind: say that your son will come home now. And I said those words, and right as I said those words, the son actually walked through the door and came home. So we ended the blessing right after that. We're like, in the name of Jesus Christ. It was such an amazing thing. Like, um, it was quite a shocking thing. And that has always stood out in my mind as it was a very peculiar experience, and I can't really explain it. And I can't really explain the why behind it because, typically you have like a reason why that happened. And I just think, and maybe I'm just like overthinking it because I think that maybe the point of it is that God is just aware of our needs. Like the son would have walked through the door regardless of us having given that blessing. Like we can't control the son, make him come home. But I think it's just this fact that God is aware of all of us. And man, that was such and I come back to that also when I think of the priesthood a lot, the power of the priesthood and just being so in tune with God, like almost synchronized in a way that you are able to hear words and then say those words as they come to you. So, in any case, all of this is a part of the reason why I decided to start my channel because I wanted to tell these stories because I know that they're very significant. And I encourage people to write them down in their journals all the time because they are so significant because this means something. Like, um, I think it might be a logical stretch to say, okay, yes, this proves that the church is true, right? It might not prove that specifically, but it does prove that there is something out there, like a supernatural force out there. Okay. And I do believe that it was God, of course. And I believe that the church is true. That is me. I believe that to be the case. And this is a part of the evidence. These are part of the data points that make up a testimony. And I realize that if people have some sort of a relationship with God in this way, that we can encourage people to come back to God, and come back to um, belief. Because I think that even if you're believing in, that's like, of course, I believe that this is the true church on the earth, right? I have a very strong testimony of that. I have other experiences that I think prove that to me. But regardless, I want people to believe in God, even if they're not a member of the church, because I know that it's important, and I know that it's probably the best thing for society. So it's a
Amen.
good.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's been a different change for me too. I've thought about, even with me sharing about Christ, about the gospel and stuff, is I used to think more about like, well, I just need to do this and this and they need to get baptized. But I'm like, you know what? If people are coming to have a knowledge of Christ and believing in God, great. I would love for them
Mm,
to know some of the things that I know and have some of the same opportunities and experiences. But you know what? If they're at the first doorstep,
mm,
and that's what I realized when I've considered for myself about doing a channel and what my purpose is. And the words came to me to bring people to the door. I just need
yeah,
to bring people to the door. They choose if they open it or not, but they are at the door and they are given opportunity, and then I leave it up to them. I have
yeah,
to let go.
that's really important. I think that's a really good um, way to take it too, because I mean, we can't really control people, but we can certainly influence them with our testimony. I love that so much. But yeah, I guess I mean we're at 45 minutes, so I guess we better move on to other parts of our story, right?
Yep.
So
So you went on your mission and then you came home when the housing market and things had crashed, and it had been
yeah,
a couple of years, and then go.
yep. Bill, I bought my first cell phone. My friends forced me to buy a cell phone. That just a flip phone at the time, but I eventually graduated to a smartphone. So so there's that. Um, but yeah, so I eventually when I came back from my mission, yeah, we really struggled financially. Just trying to go to school. I went to school to learn art. I eventually settled on becoming an illustrator, a children's book illustrator specifically. So I studied to do that. We studied anatomy. We studied all the different things. I love art. I still love to do art, and it all has contributed into what I do now as a creative. Um, But yeah, so we struggled financially. I finally, it's like when I first came back home from my mission, I actually did work at Wendy's again because I was like the only place that was willing to even consider hiring me again. And they hired me immediately because they already knew me from before my mission. So I worked there for, I think it was another year before I was hired at UVU as their, because UVU does these classes where they broadcast. So we broadcast classes all throughout Utah. And so I was in charge of taking care of the media equipment and broadcasting it out. So that was kind of actually something that, just has always been on the back of my mind. It's like you can teach people, and it's very effective to teach people through media. Okay. So YouTube definitely is just a fantastic tool to do that. So I was also hired. And so that was my first part-time job. The second part-time job I was working at the same time was I worked as an event coordinator at the Springville Museum of Art. And I love Springville Museum of Art, and I have just the fondest memories. And a part of me wants to go back there and work, but I know I can't do that. But I just loved it there because we would set up the venue for like different activities that people would have. Mostly it was weddings. So people can rent out the venue, and so we'd set everything up. We get the tables and the chairs set up for everybody, and we just make sure that nobody touches the artwork. So yeah, it was quite the amazing thing. And then of course they change out the artwork, so we get to go around and see everything that they have in the museum, and that was just it's a really fun time for in my life. I look back on those days with a lot of fondness because I don't often get to go to the museum as much as I would like to in nowadays. But yeah, in the evenings we would go and we would uh, oftentimes it would be outdoors in the rose garden because the Springville Museum has a rose garden too, and it's a sculpture garden. And those it was just beautiful weather all the time and got a lot of sun. So yeah, and then I quit those jobs because I had an offer finally after several years of doing that. I got an offer to work as a graphic designer for a company in Payson called Timken. And that was quite the interesting experience as well. That was not a good experience at all. Uh, yeah, and I don't really want to dwell on that too much, but I worked there for 8 months, and I decided that I needed to leave there because it was quite an abusive environment there. And
You
Timken
got
no
some
longer exists
experience
because
probably though, didn't you? Like some experience that you could put down from it probably.
yes, absolutely.
So there you
Absolutely,
go.
and in fact, that came into play later. It comes into play later. All of this comes into play later. My interest in art, my interest in the graphic design aspect of art, and then it comes into play later because I applied for a job. Immediately, I was hired because they realized that I was qualified to work as a graphic designer, and Timken was not willing to recognize that, and it seemed like they were just trying to push me out, really. But in any case, I was hired immediately and I left immediately, not giving in a 2 weeks notice because they were awful people. And I don't regret that decision at all. And I would not ask for references from them. So yeah, it was quite the thing. So yeah, we went and I worked for Georgetown Development for, oh my goodness, for quite some time. I think it was about 5 years that I worked at Georgetown. I think that's the case. Let me think about. I think it was 3 or 5 years. I might be getting things confused in my mind. But yeah, it was during this time. Things were going really well. I loved working at Georgetown. The people there were great. They're a development company and they help build houses. So that was when I kind of got interested in real estate. I studied real estate and I got my real estate license, and I was actually able to buy my home. So that
Oh,
was these milestones. Oh yes, and I forgot to mention the milestone at Timken was getting a car, right? Like just having the basic necessities of life so I can drive and have a car. I went to the temple to figure out, why, because I felt that God had led me to work at Timken for some reason. And so I went to the temple to figure out, well, I was only there for 8 months. It's like, why did you send me here?
hmm.
And the answer that I got then, and I think I know more of the answer now, of course, but the answer that I got then was so that you can get a car. So, yeah. And I was like,
Simple
oh,
answer for
okay,
you.
well, Yeah, I had been praying for a car, and I was able to buy a car within that 8-month time frame. They did pay very well.
Yeah.
It was $16 an hour. Woo! But but yeah, it was like it was a big deal for me at the time because I mean that was I was able to drive now, so that was good. It was very good, and yeah, working at Timken, I was able to get a house, so that was something else. Always just that hard work ethic comes back to my mind too. Um, just working. That has been a very large part of my life for sure. That was a large part of my grandma's life too, actually. But and my dad. But yeah, where was I going with that? So yeah, I quit Georgetown because I realized that they weren't willing to pay me more than what I was making, and I needed to make more. Um, and so, well, actually, strike that. It wasn't all because of that. It was because the pandemic started as well. So it was like I was kind of at this point in my life where I was like, okay, so I got my real estate license and I wasn't going to be able to use it at Georgetown because they already had all the real estate agents that they needed. They liked me where I was and I couldn't really expand anymore, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So it wasn't just about the monetary, considerations. But they weren't able to hire me as a real estate agent. So I quit. It was during the time of the pandemic, and I realized at that time that that was probably not the best choice. Well,
Right.
that's what I thought at the time, right? I thought this is probably not the best choice because I am just trying to start a real estate business, and oh my goodness, that is not something that you want to start probably in a pandemic. Um, you can't really visit people, so I don't know. I just came home one day and I realized that I had made a mistake. Like I realized that this was not the right direction that I needed to be going in. It was just a few weeks after I had quit. The pandemic was just getting into the full swing of things. Um, and I was like, this is not the right choice to make. I need to go back to what God had been preparing me to do, which was something involved in art, something involved with graphic design. And so I started my graphic design business. And so, that's what I've been, so focused on for these last 5 years actually. And, always back when I came home from my mission, I thought it would be so cool if I could start like a YouTube channel or a podcast or something where we could tell missionary stories. Okay. And I was like, that was always just in my mind. Like, I need to start a YouTube channel. It would be so cool to talk about missionary stories with other missionaries and bring them onto the program and have them tell their stories. And that always been in the back of my mind. And so I was doing this graphic design though, and I was like, okay, so I know that this works. I can make a living doing this. And it was just so hard, like trying to find the time to do a podcast, So I just never did it. It was just like my only regret in not starting this podcast is not starting it sooner because of the fact that this was truly what everything is building up to. And perhaps I'm not even finished yet. Maybe there's more on the way, like down the line, So I am extremely grateful for everything that has happened in my life to lead me to this point. And I, I don't know. I see God's hand in it every step of the way, and I feel such gratitude, and I express that gratitude very often. And but yeah, just leading up to this moment is something that I think that we would do well to remember it because in the moment when you're struggling, a lot of times, because there was struggle all along the way on this. Don't get me wrong, like I'm very grateful for everything that happened, but it was hard. It was starting a graphic design business was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done. Because you don't know if you're going to get paid, and there was 3 months there where I was like, "Oh boy, this is going to be tight, you guys. I have a mortgage to pay." Um, and things just took off, and I know that it was because God helped. So it was quite a spectacular thing to behold, but it was still hard every step of the way. Yeah, and starting a YouTube channel was very hard. I don't think that people realize just how hard it is. But yeah, going back to the work ethic though, it's very important. But yeah,
Well,
Melissa,
what
do
are
you have
some
any thoughts? I'm sorry.
it's okay. What are some of the things that kind of surprise you about yourself with doing a podcast? Because I didn't realize that you had been planning this like since you came home from your mission that you were
Hmm.
going to do something like this. So what was one of the things though that surprised you about with doing a podcast, like good and bad, whichever you'd like to talk
Surprised
about?
me about it. Just like about just doing it or making it or like in the
just
process of just anything.
just anything, the experiences, the
Well, okay, so yeah, I was not aware just how tricky it would be. It's very tricky. It's very I wasn't aware how tricky it would be to get actual video footage into your computer to actually do that because I thought, because it's just like, and I realized, I actually started a YouTube channel a little bit earlier with my brothers and got a little experience from doing that, but we kind of stopped that. But any case, it, getting the audio to mix with the video and getting everything into the computer was a challenge initially. So I realized that when I started it, and I'm still doing my graphic design business, by the way. I haven't stopped doing that. I view that as a part of the stewardship that God's given me. And so I don't want to just abandon that thing that he gave me, right? Um,
and I'm just going to interject really quick.
yeah.
Seth's business cards are awesome. They're just
Yeah, so
they're
yeah, we
just
print.
next level. Because I'm gonna be honest, like
Yeah.
I was like, business cards are kind of a thing of the past. They've kind of like a dinosaur, kind of died. But like seeing his, I was like, these are art. I'm like they
Yeah,
gotta,
so
they're not cheap, but I was like, these
yeah.
they're awesome. They're
Yeah,
awesome.
we make high quality business cards is what we are known for. And really that's kind of the niche, right? Because the only people who are printing business cards are people who want something really, really nice. So we do really, really nice brochures, stickers, business cards, all of that kind of stuff. And I specialized in printing because of my time at Timken, because they specialized in flexographic printing. So I got really good at preparing files for print. So yeah, all of this leads up to everything leads up into everything else. You can see God's hand in it every step of the way. So, but yeah, that was the one thing that really surprised me, Melissa, was how difficult it was to get the footage and the audio together. So that was a challenge. Another thing that was a challenge and that I wasn't expecting was the amount of pushback that comes along with becoming a podcaster and kind of just the vitriol that comes with telling Latter-day Saint stories, and telling preaching the gospel. People don't like that apparently, and they try to stop that as much as they can because I don't know, they feel vindicated in attacking somebody else's religion. Um, but I mean, it wasn't really surprising because I had faced that in my mission a lot of the times. There's certainly a lot of hatred toward Latter Day Saints just throughout the entire world. Um, but yeah, I mean, it still was surprising though. It's kind of like how early it started. So it's like, oh, okay, so I guess this is what we can expect. So there was that aspect of it. There's quite a lot of drama as well, which I wasn't expecting. So yeah, there's certainly a lot of drama, just amongst other people. So
Now,
yeah,
what's
I
some of
always
the
avoid
good
drama.
things though that surprised you? What's some
Good
of
things.
like? Is there a few moments that you remember
Oh yeah,
that you felt like maybe this kind of reverence for what
yeah,
you were doing, like that it's like Heavenly Father grabbed onto you and it's like, yeah, Seth,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think that one of those moments was, and I've always had a very special um place in my heart, I guess you could say, just for these missionary stories. And that's what we started doing, was doing the missionary stories. We kind of migrated away from that because it is very hard to schedule with missionaries, and especially people who are not used to coming on camera. But I still revere those stories quite a lot. And I guess one of the moments that really really brought home the sacred nature of the stories that we were telling was when I talked to my old mission companion, Kendall Gashardo, and we had him on the program. And it just really brought back a lot of memories, some of the sacred experiences that we went through together in our time in the mission offices was probably the best times of my mission, spiritually speaking. We were on a spiritual high because God was working with us so much to bring about his purposes in our missions. And it was very hard because my companion was the secretary of the president. So he was in charge of getting everything in the mission organized. But God was definitely there helping us every step of the way. We could only go out in the evenings to do work. And so you can see, and we baptized 4 people. That was very remarkable. For the amount of time that we were able to work, it's very remarkable. And it's a very high Catholic area as well. But in any case, that just to answer your question, go back to the main point of your question. That was when just remembering, and the act of remembering really brought home the importance of the power that these stories have, and the power that we have on YouTube in general to bring the spirit to people. And just feeling that spirit was a reminder of that, if that makes any sense. But yeah, the spirit really has been a part of this process all along. I try to follow the spirit the best I can in the topics, in writing about the topics that we choose to cover. And I tried to bring a spiritual message. And what has really actually surprised me is the amount of inspiration that comes from the Holy Spirit as I'm writing the episodes. And I've noticed a real power behind actually the written word and writing these things out, because you'll write them and you'll receive revelation, you'll write it and you'll receive more revelation on top of it. And it all comes together in ways that you never expected. When you find like a very engaging topic, you're like, oh, okay, so this is an interesting topic. We need to cover this on the channel. It would be very fun to do this, whatever this topic happens to be. It's a very fascinating topic. I want to talk about it. But then as you actually sit down to write, that's when the inspiration comes, and the spirit really guides me in the way that the message that needs to be shared. And there's people who have reached out to me in the comment section who said, I really needed to hear what you had to say today. And I'm like, yes, I know, because I felt that somebody in my audience, and I said that during the episode, somebody needs to hear this. And it's just like some random little insert that I put out there. So, but yeah, then that comes back in the comment section. They're like, I needed to hear it. So it's very special, the connection that the spirit brings. So.
And how did you come up with your name, Risine? How did you decide on that? Or how did you feel? Was that always the channel name, or was it different? Did it change?
I knew that. So a part of starting my channel was, it's like this intricate concept, right, in my mind. Like I wanted to get people on my program to tell their missionary stories, to help bring people back to God. And a part of it was, from the very earliest part of when I started the channel, I knew that I had to focus for some reason on the spiritual gifts. And I realized that the spiritual gifts were a part of building Zion. And I knew that it was a part of preparing for the second coming. And actually, a part of the thing that really just kind of kicked me in the butt and made me and spurred me on was kind of these last messages delivered by the prophet, and kind of spurred me into, okay, so I have to start the YouTube channel, even though it's really hard right now with the graphic design business. I gotta do it. I gotta start, because the spirit is really kind of urging me to do that right now. So I started it. I did it. We started the channel, and I realized that we had to focus in on the spiritual gifts, because I had been really just studying that. And I realized that it was so important for building Zion. And so yeah, all of these different concepts are connected together. I'm trying to communicate with you. Okay, so where was I going with that? All right, so yeah, we had the spiritual gifts as a concept that was very, very important. What was your question? Sorry.
was how you came about
Why
with the
Rise
name
Zion?
Rise
Right, that's the
Zion.
question. Went off on this tangent. So yeah, it was all a part of building Zion. That's why I started the channel name Rise Zion. And it is also partially due to graphic design choices. Okay. Because I wanted to design a really cool logo. And I realized that branding is just as important um, when you're starting any new venture. Branding is so important because that is recognition right there. And I knew that the power of it. There's such power also in images. So I had to come up with a name that was symmetrical, and I wanted it to be Rise Zion because there's four letters and it's symmetrical and they go next to each other, right next to each other. And they also stack very, very nicely in the round logo that I wanted to create for the icon. So it looks like the temple, and then behind you have Jesus Christ on top of a temple-like structure, which the words form, and then you have the crescent moon in the background. And that actually, Melissa, is a symbol from Constantinople. So the star and the crescent moon is something that the Muslims actually stole from Constantinople.
Hmm.
so so yeah, that's kind of the story behind it. And violet, I chose royal violet, to kind of symbolize Jesus Christ's return and the fact that we'll all be ruling with him um, when that time comes. And that has also been something that, even leading up to making this channel before I even started it, I was getting these kind of revelations and dreams and stuff that revealed to me certain aspects that I needed to bring up in the channel when I actually started it. So it was like the 2 years during the pandemic, or thereabout 2 years, where I was really active in my journals, and you can see my journals back here in the background. I have like a stack of them right here. My thumb is not going in the right direction. Right
Are
there.
they under the little
There it is.
green guy? Are your
Not under
journals?
it, but yeah, on the third shelf, on the third, right there where my thumb is. So yeah,
Oh, by your shoulder.
right under the Journal of Discourses. So yeah, I really got serious in writing these things down, writing the dreams that I was having down, writing down the impressions that I was having, and seeing if these things meant anything in a scientific way, testing the things that Joseph Smith had said regarding dreams. And I realized that they were super important for building the kingdom on earth. And they are like, and a part of my patriarchal blessing too, and I'll just say this because it is definitely integral to why I started the YouTube channel as well. So I got my patriarchal blessing before I went on my mission, and it says specifically in my patriarchal blessing that I will prepare the world for the second coming. So you will prepare the world for his arrival. That's the commandment that I have. So I take
No
that as a
pressure.
commandment. I don't view it as a prediction. I view it as a commandment. You will do this. So
Yeah, I agree. And I just feel like as you and I went, it's interesting because the spiritual gifts is kind of what brought us together as well as friends. The first
mhm.
video we did together was
Oh yeah.
about spiritual gifts. And so, and I will say for myself doing art, I have misused my art before. I have done art before that I was not proud of and it was not appropriate. And also I having had an interest in marketing and stuff like that, I
Oh.
just as a youth, I made some choices, not terrible things, but not things that now I'd be like, oh, that was good, let me show you. And so I think that's the thing is too, is we talked about spiritual, when does a talent become a spiritual gift? And we talked about how
Mhm.
when you consecrate it to the Lord. And so I think we all have options and opportunities, but there's always going to be times where we're testing the boundaries maybe of that gift a little bit, and we feel like we kind of go off the side. But and the thing is there's always an opportunity for us to write our course and
Hmm.
learn from that. And we don't always know why certain things happen,
Mm.
and we can't
Mhm.
look at certain choices as being like, oh well, I'm condemned now, I'm trapped in a prison of mistakes and nothing can change them, because there's none of us here they're perfect but Jesus Christ.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah, that's
so
true.
yeah, and so I think that a lot of times we just have to say that to ourselves. I had a friend that who wasn't going through the temple yet, and I said, well, who's perfect? And I was like, aren't any of us perfect? He planned the
Mm.
atonement for a reason, right? And he's like, yeah, you're probably right. And I was going like, okay, then you're all right. Then you can move forward now, and don't perfection is not going to happen right now. It's not. Just
True.
accept that. You know, we
Yeah.
just try. We get
Yeah,
points for
I think it
trying.
is really interesting that you and I kind of met because of the spiritual gifts and kind of me talking about
Mhm.
the importance of them. And then we did the interview together. So that was really great. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, and it's amazing because, like I said, Sherry do that was one that I wasn't even there, and somebody brought me the pamphlet from it. Sherry wasn't there
Yeah.
either because she got sick. And to me, it's
Yeah.
just that great example of like when we are listening to the Lord, we can do with this, but we have to be willing to take steps towards it, not say like, well, this just obviously isn't meant to happen. Well,
Mm,
look how long it took for you to start your podcast, you know.
right.
And you tried a different way and that wasn't quite the right way, but we learn from things, and that's life. Life is learning, and we get other opportunities to figure stuff out. And as you said, like you found that it led you towards what you're doing now.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
anyway, so thank you so much, Seth. It was really fun getting to talk with you some more. And I am glad I did ask you about those mission stories. I know my husband, he was like surprised when
Mm,
were dating before we got married that I would ask him. He's like, "You really want to know these stories?" I'm like, "You went on a mission for us, okay?" I'm like, so
yeah.
I feel like those stories are my stories, and so
Yeah, they're so
um,
important too because they're very faith promoting in ways. I think that we hesitate to share our stories for whatever reason, and I think that when the spirit prompts you to tell your stories because it's really important that we do share those things. So,
and you won't find out until you do.
yeah.
You know, yeah, the Lord just he gives us opportunities to listen and to learn and to be his hands, be his eyes, and like I said, be the light on the runway to guide people home. I just keep feeling that it's like everybody's trying to go back to the light from where they came, and they have that feeling of home and God and Jesus Christ, and they've kind of forgotten it for a time in this world. And those of us that have it, we got to be the light. So anyways, thank you
Mhm.
so much for what you're doing,
You
Seth.
bet.
And I just appreciate too that even though I feel like part of why you've been so blessed to do well with your channel is you've also been willing to just be open to listening to different people's ideas. You read
Mhm.
the comments, you care about the people, and I can tell that's what they feel too, is that it isn't just you talking, it's you wanting to share and participate with people and rise
Yeah, I
Zion.
do. Yeah, I do. I think that it's a community, right? We have to build this community together, and I love that about the gospel. I love the idea and concept of Zion, and we could talk for hours about what Zion looks like, because but yeah, I mean, we're just seeing glimpses of what Zion looks like, and I love that about this YouTube channels because we get to talk to so many different people, and everybody kind of has a little bit of that piece of the puzzle to put
Yes.
into Zion. That's what I love.
And people all over the world that you would never be able to talk to otherwise.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have people from all over the world watching the channel right now, which is truly remarkable to me. Um, and YouTube is such a powerful tool now that it automatically translates all of my content, and so it goes out throughout all of the world. So it's really quite a remarkable thing.
So, anyways, all right. Well, we probably better get going, but thank you so much again,
Yeah,
Seth. So
of
please
course.
look for the link in the description below for Seth's channel, Rise Zion.
Oh,
And
well, or you can just look it up, Rise Zion. It's Rise Zion.
yeah, I'll put it in the description of the video that you can look it up.
Oh,
So,
all
anyways,
right.
well, thanks so much, Seth, and thank you everybody for being here, and we will see you later. Bye.
All right. Bye.